And
So
we assume that back then that they didn't have, you know, exactly what's probably going on now. Well, not probably, but what is going on here, like geoengineering and such. And I hear about
exactly.
sand coming out of the sky and things like that.
Lost Book of Enki tells it very clearly. They were technological stuff, and they were all glowing as they went down with Marduk, and they were smashing each one as they went down. That probably was the power system, and they were making other people pay for doing what they did to Marduk, because Marduk was sealed up inside the Great Pyramid.
Hmm.
So there's another theory. It's actually in writing. I mean, Sitchin, either he was the best BS artist anyone had ever heard, because
No,
he did all these tablets, and in the tablets he said they had energy weapons, they had this, they had that, they had the ability to come from Nibiru straight to our system, although they never told how much time it was, you know, but clearly it wasn't a NASA shuttle they were using. Um, you know, he described all that stuff, and in tablets number 9, number 10, he goes into exact detail as to when they found out that Nibiru's orbit was altered and why it was doing the damage.
mhm. Well, I think you muted on us.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
probably on the right side of our system, because Nibiru comes through clockwise, according to uh, let's see, Robert S. Harrington. He says it had an orbit. He never said it had a ecliptical thing. He said it had an orbit, and the orbit was about 35 to 40 degrees on the ecliptic. And when you look at the orbital ecliptic of Sedna compared to our system, God, it's almost the same. So, you know, they had technology. They had very advanced technology. And if you followed everything they did in the different things, they knew that this stuff was going to bring Nibiru too close to Mars, thereby taking it too close to the Earth. Now, Nibiru was a big planet, and it has its own moons. So are these the moons that were swinging through our system around Nibiru that they actually saw back between 1558 and 1600? I don't know. But Nibiru, its orbit never comes any closer than between Jupiter and Mars. So something was clearly seen every single time something happened. And the
Well,
ancient Egyptians called the destroyer.
I'll tell you what I want to do. My plan is I want to seriously confuse future people, and so I'm looking to bury some artifacts of some sort. You know, maybe some wild stories. I want to bury this stuff really good, and hopefully, you know, maybe a couple 100,000 years from now they find it, and who knows? I might be on everybody's
Well,
wall.
yeah, I don't know what your other two guests think about this stuff. You know, what I'm saying here. You know, I can only tell what I've researched. My first
Right.
research had nothing to do with Sitchin or Velikovsky. All of my friends told me, don't even think of reading their stuff. It's all BS. So I did all my research on my own, on the internet, using a time frame between somewhere around 1558, and all these things just dropped right into place.
All
And
right.
then you hear about Eisenhower meeting with 2 alien races and 3 alien races back in '54. And then you hear about Eisenhower meeting with the Anunnaki directly when he went to Holloman Air Force Base in 1955. And then you hear about the leaked information that went in the early 2000s from a high-ranking Jesuit priest to Christopher Barbato, which was handed to his friend Lucas Gantamberlo, which did a 2-hour video with Project Camelot in 2008. And he has a transcript of both tapes. You can sit there and just read it right down. Yes, they knew about Nibiru. Yes, they knew about the brown dwarf star. Yes, they knew about the Anunnaki. They actually met with the Anunnaki. And then you got our former Pope blasting away on German radio saying that the Jesuits are evil and they have an alien agenda, and that the new Pope is going to possibly be the first person to initiate first contact because he wants the Vatican to be superior amongst all the other religions. And it's like, okay. And then here in California, several months ago, we had the tarantulas have their mating season. And its mating season was 2 months in advance than it had ever been done before. They couldn't figure out why the tarantulas were going to go mate, and it was actually exactly 2 months in advance. And then recently, our weather guys out here are saying all the stuff coming across the Pacific is also, again, 2 months in advance. So I'm saying, whoa, hold on here a second. What's changing our seasons all of a sudden, if there is a change?
Well, now that can be associated. I don't want to be, I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, but
sure.
I mean that some of that could be associated with the weather modification that they've done here. That I mean, they might have knocked it out of whack. We got psychos in charge, but I mean,
exactly.
That could be.
But the ETs have also intervened this time. They didn't do that last time between 1558 and 1600. How do I know that? NASA again. NASA's satellites have been picking up these massive space probes that are orbiting our sun. These things have been orbiting our sun for over 7 years. Now, when you put that into the fact that we have an electrical solar system that's at one level, a level of charge, and if you take the idea of a brown dwarf which has its own system orbiting around our system, so now it's gotten too close to our sun, so our sun now is interacting between it and the brown dwarf, Nemesis, and it's also interacting between the planet Nibiru, which is coming through our system.
So they're dancing.
So you have a large, there's a large interaction there that's causing the highest recorded volcanic activity in human history.
Can I toss something in here as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just recently, I ran across information actually that the Inuit in Alaska have noticed that the time that the sun is in the sky is different than it ever has been.
Yeah.
The sun is setting in a different location than what it should be, and that it's rising in the spot that it should be, but it's setting in a different spot than it should be. And each year it kind of is at a different degree than what it should.
Yeah.
If it was the precession of the equinox, for instance, the sun would rise in a different area. But what they're noticing is that it's rising in the same area, but setting far off in the distance of what it should be.
I've been reading about that too. I've been following them.
Yeah, I read there was a woman who said, an old woman who said that, the sun would always set right behind her barn or something like that, and it don't no more. And so, I didn't know how much to put into that, but I guess it's something that could certainly be researched.
Right. I mean, if you think about the precession of the equinox, it's going to happen that way, that the sun is going to set in a different spot each day. Granted, it's by one 1/1000th of a degree each day, but that it should also rise in that 1/1000th of a degree as well. And what they're noticing is that it's actually quickly changing, like radically quickly changing, and that it's still rising in the same area. That shows that something is going on that's different than this precession idea.
And the Inuit, they know, going back out God knows how long, where it sets, where it rises all around the year. So
right.
if it's changed, they know it. And
what they've also I'm sorry, go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say they've also noticed that the way that the wind blows across the snow shifts it as well. Like normally the snow would be going from north to south, and what they're noticing now is that it's east to west. So it's changing the way that the snow drifts are laying across the ground. They've normally been north to south, and they could find their ways back to their homes, for instance, by following the north-south trails that are made in the snow by the snow blowing, by the drifts. And
Sure.
now they've had to change things because it's actually going east to west. And they've said that they've noticed that much of their weather has changed there because the weather is now coming from the east instead of from the north. And it's much worse because from the east, it's getting much more of a turbulence going on.
Right. Now, one thing I want to point out amongst all the things I was talking about, I always mentioned heat and cold. Heat and cold. Have either of you two, or all three of you, have either of you ever read the Colburn?
I have,
hardback
yes.
version.
I have, yes.
I've read parts of it. I haven't read it all though. I read the parts that contain, about this this destroyer.
Okay. Now, the destroyer is mentioned several times around inside the Kolbrin. The Kolbrin has various different accounts. One of the accounts was, which actually matches exactly where Lost Book of Enki ended, where Enki went beyond the orders of Enlil and was not supposed to tell anyone about what was the flood that was going to be coming up. He went to Zerasudra, which was the other name for Noah, and the account that's in the Kolbrin talks about this one person having a dream, which he thought he heard through the reeds of his house, telling him to build an ark, and gave him exact dimensions. And the ark was built exactly the way it was told. And he describes exactly how it was actually 3 decks. It was all in a flat, long, same cubits as mentioned in the Bible. And it was 3 decks. The decks were split in right down the center, so it had 6 decks. And on each deck there was a water cistern that was lined inside and out with tar. There were the cisterns. Now, anyone that's ever tried to drink water from cisterns full of tar, you know you can't do it. So just like in the Book of Enki, they were ballast tanks. He also mentions exactly who went on the ark. And there must have been close to 100 people that were on board that ark, according to the account put in the Kolbrin. And they said that at the point when they knew it was going to happen, they saw the destroyer show up in the skies. Everything shifted. Stars shifted, moon, sun shifted, and then came the wave. Now, if you follow the Lost Book of Enki, the ark actually submerged. So it was below the water, so it wasn't being battered by riding on top. But at some point, the ark had to surface. Then they said they actually went through a immense time of heat and immense time of cold, which was being felt even inside the ark. Now, as I grew up in the 60s and 70s, I kept hearing about people going up on Mount Ararat, and they were looking for the ark because, spy planes had gone over and they took photographs, and several of these people with their teams actually found the ark, but their cameras wouldn't work, or they didn't have their cameras, so they drew what they saw. And right in front of you, you have the drawing of the ark, which will split open, showing 3 decks, and looks and matches the exact account from the Kolbrin, telling how this thing was built. Now, to get into the heat and cold part, an author years ago, actually 2 authors, they wrote a book.
Hold that thought there, Robert. And I have read most of it. I didn't read it all. There's, I certainly went after the parts that referred to what we're talking to tonight and are talking about tonight, and it's fascinating. I'll tell you, it's said to be the oldest scripture, I believe, that exists. But then nobody can prove exactly where it came from. So, but it is old. So, just fascinating stuff, Robert. Go ahead. You could pick up where you left off. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. The problem that's been put down through all of the ancient accounts is that they have a time of intense cold, hot, intense cold. Now, this one book is called Cataclysm, Compelling Evidence of a Cosmic Catastrophe in 9500 BC. Something happened. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no one's talking. I think you're hearing feedback.
Okay. Now, by other things I've read, including Velikovsky. Velikovsky also mentions it. So you've got several different people looking at this from different points of view at different times, and they're all saying this is what happened. These 2 gentlemen, they also say that the ice ripped off of Antarctica, creating a massive wave from Antarctica all the way up around the planet, up to the Arctic, rebounding all the way back down, rebounding all the way back up, just like in the book Lost Book of Enki, tablets number 9 and number 10. So either Lost Book of Enki was completely BS and he completely followed all these ancient things and no one caught him doing it, or these two guys here are lying with their book, saying that they found what they called tills. This was the junk that was floating around in the world's oceans that was caught between ancient monuments that still stood, was piled into the back of huge caves that were well above sea level back then. These tills clearly showed, like someone put in a blender, animals, their bones, all the ancient plant life from all over the planet, and the stuff that was found in certain points around where they dug it out of. They couldn't live there. So it was from somewhere else. How did it get up there? They say it was the massive Noah's flood, or this type of flood. No, I don't mention Noah's flood. They say it was this massive thing coming too close to the Earth, causing the Earth to stop. Now, where would all the water come if the Earth stopped rotating? Well, as anyone knows in standard high school or junior high geography and stuff, the Earth is spinning, and because of its spin, most of the world's oceans are puffed out at the equator. Okay, and they stay there because, like a top that's spinning, they're all out there balancing out the planet. Right. So if you suddenly get the Earth to suddenly start to slow down because of something outside of the Earth acting on the Earth, all that water is going to start evening out around the entire planet. So now the water gets far super deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's completely covering almost everything. Just like in the movie 2012, where the waters now are almost at the top of Mount Everest. You know,
yeah, that makes total sense. That, yeah, absolutely.
And then as the rotation started back up, because as this thing went around it a certain way, it caused the rotation to go the other direction. So as the rotation started to pick up, the water receded back out to where it was supposed to be at the equators. But now, because of tectonic plates doing this or that, it has to settle into different locations where it had never been before, or went back to exactly where it was, and the ground is starting to dry out. Now, anyone who's followed any of the prophets, Nostradamus talks about two suns in the sky where the Earth lost its gravitational force and then suddenly regained it again, all this different stuff. But there's Mother Shipton. Everyone forgets about her. Supposedly, she wrote all her prophecies before she was burned. She was born just before Nostradamus and died just before him again. Now, other people say, oh, no, Bob, you're telling us all a bunch of junk. This other guy from the 1600s did it. Okay, cool. If he actually wrote exactly what Mother Shipton and actually created all, then he was an extreme prophet. Because at a certain point in her prophecy, she says, for everyone that survives the century through, all of this will happen. And anyone who has researched a geological pole shift or pole shift would understand exactly what she's saying. She's saying that the land that was underneath the oceans is now up above, and everyone has to live on top of what used to be underneath the oceans. The water has shifted to new locations, blah, 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 blah. And then she mentions in there, at a certain point, a silver craft comes to view and spews out men of like unknown. First contact, if you follow the time frame that she has put out. Okay? So we've had a whole bunch of prophecies and stuff. They all came from over 2,000 years ago, and they all supposed to have happened by June 1st, 2013. Not one of the prophecies have come true now. So you can either say they're all BS, or someone has stopped them from happening. Now, there's a doctor that you probably know him, Michael. He's a remote viewer.
Oh,
Courtney Brown.
Uh-huh.
He did a a remote viewing thing from 2008 to 2013. In his remote viewing, everyone that was in his team all said that by 2013, June 1st, massive meteorites would have hit the world's oceans, causing massive displacement waves. These displacement waves would have cleaned the Hawaiian Islands. Nothing was left on them. Washington, D.C. was gone. The capital was gone. Advocates. Everything that should have happened by December 21st, 2012 never happened. But if you go back to the end of the last Aztec world or Mayan world, 5,200 years ago, something did happen. National Geographic made it very clear. They did a show years ago talking about pole shifts. And the first guy, don't believe pole shifts. We went up to Svalbard, Norway, which plays a good part in what I'm about ready to say here.
Oh, okay.
And it was thousands and thousands of years ago, and it had to have happened very, very, very slowly. And then the scientist that was at the end of the show said, no, no, no. Down here in the Andes, down here in central area down there, they found a glacier that was retreating, and under its bed they found rooted plants. And these rooted plants were the type that grew during a nice sunny season. And these plants were dated back by the carbon dating back to almost exactly 5,200 years ago, right almost to the exact end of the last Mayan Aztec world. Okay, so something did happen back then. Something happened causing a glacier to suddenly start forming on top of nice summer-type plants. So
well, we have that happening right now with this polar vortex thing. If you look at the way that the polar vortex looks right now here in America, it forms the almost exact shape of the previous glacier that was here during the last mini ice age, for instance.
And I've been following that. Oh, geez, that thing is swinging through Washington and Oregon, going all the way down to Texas, and it's just something else. Well, okay, cool. That's another point. You see, I used a one of those type pins you push into a map. I've been following all these hints and glitches and everything with those, and they clearly show that something either was stopped or has been slowed way down because of these massive things that are all around our sun. See, the NASA scientists and all the other scientists all predicted that we would have one massive solar storm after the other, starting in 2012. Because this solar season was supposed to have been a massive solar season. Where are all the storms? They're not there. They're all shaking their heads because they don't know what is causing it, supposedly. And that's what leads me to believe that these massive solar probes that have been recorded around our sun for over 7 years, and I've got the images to prove it, just like the massive ships that come into our system on a daily basis.
See, what I don't get though is what's the purpose of ET stopping something like Nibiru from happening to us or something along that, but then at the same time allowing something like Fukushima to happen. And that's where I get stuck with that.
Our sun controls, believe it or not, our earthquakes, tectonic movements, controls the volcanic activity on our planet. It controls a lot more than no one wants to tell us it does. And that's why in my opinion, and these things are massive, as I sent you some of the images last time I was on your show, so you can actually look at these things. These things are close to our sun. They look like they have shields around them, and they're massive. They're controlling our sun's output, its interaction between all of the things I said are coming through, and they're trying to make it not as bad as it did during the last visit. Because back then, a lot of the civilizations were just washed away. The Aztecs and the Mayans, they had to run to the top of their mountains to not be washed away by the sudden rise of ocean water.
But if the sun don't kill you, then the chemtrails and the pollution in our oceans
will. The chemtrails are a different thing, and I thought I went over that last. Probably I didn't.
Well, no,
The chemtrails started way back when. I have a lab report. I never sent it to you. Lab report from 2006, 2007. This lab report worked with samples that were taken from Italy and from Texas. And I have the lab report, and it's very clear, multiple pages, and their hypothesis on this was that the stuff they were picking up was all created.
Oh, yeah.
It was not natural. It was all created, and it would cause what they called more gallons.
It causes a lot more than that. More gallons. It's killing plant life. It's nanobots, we're learning, are in some of these chemtrails. And that,
Okay,
yeah.
now go back to the late 70s. The Georgia Guidestones were made by someone from a Rosicrucian type thing. What's on the Georgia Guidestones? On 3 massive stones in every language known around the planet.
Well, now hold on.
There's a basic 10 commandments saying don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, and never allow the population to go above 500 million again.
Well, I'll tell you something. Last time I had mentioned the Japanese language, and you weren't sure if that was on there or not, and I had double-checked it, and the Japanese language is not on the Georgia Guidestone. So that leads me to wonder if they knew that this Fukushima thing maybe was going to wipe them out.
I don't know. Okay, now go ahead further in time. All the FEMA camps were built around the United States and into southern Canada. All the huge amounts of caskets were being built, and they were buried really close to the FEMA camps. Up until 2013, we were hearing one account after the other, after the other, after the other, of every known agency in the United States government buying massive amounts of ammunition, buying massive amounts of handguns, rifles, whatever. A lot of the police departments were now suddenly buying up used military equipment. Now, I know I have the pictures of it. There were several train loads of automobile cars. You know, those huge things that are 3 levels. Certain parts of the South were converting those into prison cars, and they had the pictures of them. Okay, from about 2012 and maybe a couple of years before that, I was hearing one story after the other, where people had nightmares. One of my friends living up in Washington, he told me of his girlfriend's massive nightmare she had. She said the entire West Coast was hit by a massive tsunami, and somehow only a few people survived, and they were struggling to survive. Then the helicopters came down, and the helicopters were picking up all the survivors. In her terms, they were taking them to prison camps. Now, this was the time before Barack Obama. She said there was a black American president. We didn't have a black American president at that time. And she had no way of knowing a black American president would be elected. She said that it was called the hiding times because everyone was hiding from the helicopters, all the survivors that had not been picked up by these things and put into prisoner camps, and they were being forced to work. Now, a friend of mine, a friend of my wife's, he was another remote viewer. He wasn't connected with Dr. I forget his name right now. Again, he said that all the chemtrails would be affecting all the survivors, and that a certain HARP frequency would activate what's in their bodies and would do certain things to them, and he wouldn't tell me what.
Oh, you know,
Okay,
it's like
so you got the stuff in the bodies, you got the HARP stuff. If these guys are telling me and my wife the truth, the survivors are going to be made to either work or die. The elites, they're all being put down in the dumbs, the deep underground military bases, which actually started up in Norway, which brings Norway into this story here. Norway, Project Camelot was started by this one engineer, a high engineer on the Dumbs. They're in Norway. So I didn't mean to cut you off there, Michael.
Oh, no.
I'm just trying to keep everything in my mind.
I just gotta let you know that
I'm looking at the time too. I'm trying to make it fast. He turned politician and he outed Norway for building all of the Dumbs. Deep underground military bases. The elite will go into all those bases, and the other people have to survive on their own because Nibiru was coming. Okay? He said it even back then. And that was exactly why the Doomsday Seed Vault was built there in Svalbard, Norway. Because if you remember going back to 1558 to 1600, fire from the sky burned everything that grew, wiping everything out that grew, and then the seasons changed. That's why the Seed Vault and every other seed vault that has not been touched by the news media around planets were built. The Doomsday Seed Vault only hit the news because the builders of the Seed Vault was and is still a who's who of the billionaires around the planet. Just like the billionaires who bought their ARC tickets in movie 2012, they're from Rockefeller, Bill Gates, all the way down. They paid for the Svalbard Seed Vault. See, all these little things and other things, one pin after the other, following something that's supposed to be happening. All the ammunition that was bought by all the the agencies, clearly on the internet, clearly on the news, clearly in multiple articles about it, they knew something was supposed to have happened by 2013. Nothing happened.
Well, then we could be off too.
Yeah, there was a lady. She was a YouTube type person. Her name was Just Call Me Kit. She did a radio show back in 2012 where she was following all of the federal contracts. Federal contracts were pulling everything away from all of our coastlines.
We are out of time, Robert. So
I'm sorry about that. Yeah.
Oh, it's quite all right. We are going to have to do some more shows. That's all there is to it. So I appreciate you putting up with the rush here, but yeah, we're out of time. So anything you want to get out there in the last minute, please go ahead and do it quickly.
Keep your eyes and ears open. Follow your news media type stuff. Listen to what they're saying about this thing is happening too soon. This thing is happening too soon. You know, little hints are being dropped. They're being leaked all over the place. The Freemasons, the Rosicrucians, that's a bloodline. No ifs, ands, or buts to me. The Grail, the Holy Grail was a bloodline from the Anunnaki on down.
All right, Robert. Well, hey, thank you so much for joining me tonight. We're going to have to do this again real soon. Ruskala, thank you as well. And we assume that back then that they didn't have, exactly what's probably going on now. Well, not probably, but what is going on here, like geoengineering and such. And I hear about sand coming out of the sky and things like that.
Lost Book of Enki tells it very clearly. They were technological stuff, and they were all glowing as they went down with Marduk, and they were smashing each one as they went down. That probably was the power system, and they were making other people pay for doing what they did to Marduk, because Marduk was sealed up inside the Great Pyramid. So there's another theory. It's actually in writing. I mean, Sitchin, either he was the best BS artist anyone had ever heard, because he did all these tablets. And in the tablets, he said they had energy weapons, they had this, they had that. They had the ability to come from Nibiru straight to our system, although they never told how much time it was, but clearly it wasn't a NASA shuttle they were using. he described all that stuff. And in tablets number 9, number 10, he goes into exact detail as to when they found out that Nibiru's orbit was altered and why it was doing the damage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you muted on us.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
probably on the right side of our system, because Nibiru comes through clockwise, according to let's see, Robert S. Harrington. He says it had an orbit. He never said it had a ecliptical thing. He said it had an orbit, and the orbit was about 35 to 40 degrees on the ecliptic. And when you look at the orbital ecliptic of Sedna compared to our system, God, it's almost the same. So, they had technology. They had very advanced technology. And if you followed everything they did in the different things, they knew that this stuff was going to bring Nibiru too close to Mars, thereby taking it too close to the Earth. Now, Nibiru was a big planet, and it has its own moons. So are these the moons that were swinging through our system around Nibiru that they actually saw back between 1558 and 1600? I don't know. But Nibiru, its orbit never comes any closer than between Jupiter and Mars. So something was clearly seen every single time something happened. And
Well,
the ancient Egyptians called it the destroyer.
I'll tell you what I want to do. My plan is I want to seriously confuse future people, and so I'm looking to bury some artifacts of some sort. Maybe some wild stories. I want to bury this stuff really good, and hopefully, maybe a couple 100,000 years from now they find it, and who knows? I might be on everybody's wall.
Yeah, I don't know what your other two guests think about this stuff. What I'm saying here, I can only tell what I've researched. My first research had nothing to do with Sitchin or Velikovsky. All of my friends told me, don't even think of reading their stuff. It's all BS. So I did all my research on my own, on the internet, using a time frame between somewhere around 1558, and all of these things just dropped right into place. And then you hear about Eisenhower meeting with 2 alien races and 3 alien races back in '54. And then you hear about Eisenhower meeting with the Anunnaki directly when he went to Holloman Air Force Base in 1955. And then you hear about the leaked information that went in the early 2000s from a high-ranking Jesuit priest to Christopher Barbato, which was handed to his friend Lucas Scantamburlo, which did a 2-hour video with Project Camelot in 2008. And he has a transcript of both tapes. You can sit there and just read it right down. Yes, they knew about Nibiru. Yes, they knew about the brown dwarf star. Yes, they knew about the Anunnaki. They actually met with the Anunnaki. And then you got our former Pope blasting away on German radio, saying that the Jesuits are evil and they have an alien agenda, and that the new Pope is going to possibly be the